This weekend, a quiet but significant diplomatic effort is set to unfold far from the usual centers of power. Miami, better known for tourism and beaches, is becoming the backdrop for sensitive talks connected to the future of the war in Ukraine. A senior envoy closely tied to Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to arrive in the city to meet with key advisors to President Donald Trump. The discussions will focus on a United States-backed proposal aimed at bringing an end to the conflict that has reshaped European security and strained global relations. The Russian delegation is expected to be led by Kirill Dmitriev, a trusted figure within the Kremlin who has served as an informal channel between Moscow and Washington. On the American side, the talks are expected to involve Steve Witkoff, acting as a White House envoy, along with Jared Kushner, President Trump's advisor and son-in-law. These meetings are taking place behind closed doors, involving individuals with direct access to the highest levels of political power. The timing of the visit is deliberate. Just days earlier, American and Ukrainian officials concluded a series of intense negotiations in Berlin, where they worked through key elements of the proposed peace framework. According to officials from both sides, those discussions resulted in notable progress, particularly on the issue of long-term security guarantees for Ukraine in the event of a future peace agreement. Despite that progress, deep divisions remain. The most difficult and politically charged issue continues to be territory. Russian officials are demanding that Ukraine surrender all remaining areas it controls in the Donbas region. For Ukraine, such a concession raises fundamental questions about sovereignty and the future of its borders. For Russia, territorial control has increasingly been presented as a non-negotiable condition. American officials are expected to use the Miami meetings to brief the Russian envoy on the outcome of the Berlin talks and to outline how the peace proposal has been updated. The objective is to assess whether Moscow is willing to engage with the revised plan or whether its position remains unchanged. At stake is whether diplomacy can narrow the remaining gaps or whether the negotiations will once again reach an impasse. At the same time, a Ukrainian delegation led by Rustem Umerov, the national security advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky, is also expected to arrive in Miami later this week. While there are currently no plans for a joint meeting involving American, Ukrainian, and Russian officials together, the presence of all three sides in the same city underscores the seriousness of the moment and the intensity of the diplomatic activity underway. These talks are part of a broader, ongoing effort. More than 2 weeks ago, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner traveled to Moscow, where they met directly with President Putin to discuss the initial outlines of the peace proposal. Dmitriev himself has been engaged in discussions with Trump's advisors for nearly 2 months, indicating that the current visit represents a continuation of a carefully managed diplomatic track rather than a sudden breakthrough. For now, expectations remain restrained. No public announcements are anticipated, and no immediate agreements are expected to emerge from the meetings in Miami. Yet the significance of the talks lies not in what is said publicly, but in what is tested privately. Each exchange serves as a measure of intent, revealing whether compromise is possible or whether the positions on both sides remain fixed. As the war continues and the human and political costs mount, these behind-the-scenes conversations carry immense weight. They may determine whether negotiations move forward toward a fragile peace or slide back into prolonged conflict. For Ukraine, for Russia, and for the international community watching closely, the outcome of these discussions could shape the next chapter of a war that has already changed the world.